Hello everyone and welcome back. It's your host Michelle aka Chat-Mort, and thank you so much for turning once again to my humble little channel. What I wanted to mention today isn't necessarily political or even in the vein of what I normally talk about, but it's one of those things that I've reflected on a lot, and it's something that I think most of you will also be able to relate to. Much like my recent video on some of my grievances regarding the left's narrative when it comes to illegal immigration, this is something that is brought over from a thread I made on Twitter, because that tends to be where I vent when I don't know who to talk to about various things that occur to me throughout the day. This is to parents specifically. Once your children surpass a certain age, sheltering them from real life issues is not parenting them. In fact, in my opinion, it is exactly the opposite. Likewise, telling your children that a certain behavior is bad without explaining why once they've reached a certain age is just as harmful, if not more so, than never addressing that issue with them at all. I'm going to give you two real-life examples from my own experience, and they're both kind of odd, but bear with me because they do explain what I'm saying here. In elementary school and in middle school, they always told us never to touch other kids if they were bleeding, and they wouldn't tell us why. If a child was injured and bleeding, I was going to help them anyway because it made no sense not to just stand by and stare at them. Why wouldn't I help somebody if they're injured? It just didn't make any sense. All the school would have had to tell us, all the health teachers would have had to tell us, all the recess monitors would have had to tell us, was that some people have blood diseases that you can catch by touching their blood. That's all they would have had to say. They could have even dumbed it down to the point of just saying that some people have illnesses that can be spread by touching their blood. That's all they would have had to say. It's not condemning toward anyone, it's not pushing any kind of stigma, it's nothing alarmist and terrifying that's going to make children become hysterical. And I would have totally understood why and respected that, and maybe thought a little bit harder about touching other kids if they were bleeding when they were injured, while you're waiting for a recess monitor or a nurse or somebody to get there to help out. My other example is something that took place in 5th grade in my writing class. I remember this one specifically. We were doing some kind of project in this class in 5th grade where we were using the kind of glue that comes in a jar that's sort of like a rubbery consistency that has a little brush attached to the lid that you unscrew and use. Our writing teacher told us not to sniff the glue, not to smell it for any reason, and then he wouldn't tell us why, which was completely peculiar and bizarre to me. I asked him, why shouldn't we smell this glue that's right in front of our faces as we're using it? And he responded by saying, because it will give you a headache. Well, since I can remember, I've had a headache constantly, so that's not an issue, so I sniffed it anyway. I didn't really understand what the big deal was. It smelled kind of odd and rubbery, and I just didn't really understand what was so exciting about it, where we would be smelling it in the first place. A bunch of people rolled their eyes at me and seemed very exasperated, and the teacher asked one of the other students to take the glue away from me, so I don't remember if I was able to even do the project or not. This, yet again, is an example of a teacher dumbing something down to the point where it makes no sense. As a 10-year-old, I had no idea getting high was a thing. Why would I? I didn't have older siblings, I wasn't exposed to, I don't know, obscene or very adult television or movies or music to where I would have any idea that that was a thing. So I had no idea. If my parents had explained this to me, which they absolutely should have by the time I got into middle school, this would not have happened because somebody would have given me context as to why you don't sniff glue. Likewise, if the teacher had not decided to be completely patronizing and condescending by giving me a total non-answer, I would have understood the problem and I wouldn't have done that thing and made myself look like an idiot one of a multitude of times in front of my peers in school. All he needed to say when I asked him why, first of all, why would somebody smell the glue, and second of all, why not, because that was a very odd specific thing for him to explicitly tell us not to do, was that it causes brain damage to inhale the chemicals in it. That's all he would have had to say. That's nothing scary, that's not overstepping his bounds into something that parents should be teaching you, that's not saying anything that could be misconstrued or upsetting in any way, shape, or form. But because he gave me a non-answer, I didn't respect it, and it made no sense to me because he treated me like an idiot instead of a human being asking a relevant question. Yet again, this is an example of giving a total non-answer, which does more harm than good when somebody's asking why they shouldn't be doing a behavior. This is also an example of the fact that my parents failed here, as they did with many issues that I was totally sheltered about until much older than most of my peers. They were not proactive whatsoever. They did not arm me with the tools and the knowledge necessary to be able to handle these things. Fortunately, I was a very, very conservative child. I was very shy, and I didn't hang out at other people's houses, and I wasn't around kids who were partiers or bad influences, so I never really got into any scenarios where not knowing why something was bad got me in serious trouble. But this is a failure on my parents' part. You need to be proactive in instances like this. The same principle applies to many real-world issues that kids end up confronting a lot. Parents often don't give their children the sex talk until their children have been sleeping around and exposed to things like HPV for several years. Parents don't approach their kids to talk to them about pornography until a lot of teenagers are already addicted to it and have been for years, to the point where they're probably going to end up having sexual dysfunction later on in life, and to where they're going to have a really difficult time perceiving and creating a healthy dynamic in sexual relationships. Parents, you need to stop being naive. If you don't arm your children with the information necessary on very serious, potentially dangerous real-world issues, they're going to get that information from their peers, from sadistic older kids, or the internet. That's how you wind up with 13-year-old children having abortions and having their reproductive systems mutilated years before their brains are developed enough to even comprehend those ramifications. That's how you wind up with a teenager who has stunted their mental development, because instead of finding out about marijuana from you, they find out about it from their douchey 14-year-old pothead friends who have no idea that it has a detrimental effect on your brain development when you smoke it before you are mentally fully developed. Parents, leaving things forbidden and mysterious gives them this immense power and this incredible draw that can be overwhelming for your children. By candidly explaining things like pornography, like sex, like drugs, like drinking, like a whole variety of different things that are going to come up inevitably in your child's life in terms that they at their age can understand, you take the power and the mystery away from those things. You treat your child like an adult in the process. And when you explain these things to them proactively, you arm them with the knowledge and the tools necessary to deal a lot more effectively with peer pressure and with the garbage the media is going to shove down their throats as they get older. I'm a very rare case. I was an extremely shy child, and I decided that certain things were bad without necessarily knowing why. That didn't mean that I didn't ask a lot of questions about them, and I didn't get really frustrated and insulted when teachers and adults treated me like a moron instead of a child with very relevant questions. But I decided that drugs were bad, that drinking was bad before I even understood what those were, and I decided not to participate in them. If I had been a little less socially uncouth, who knows, maybe I would have been in more situations where that could have arisen and where I could have gotten myself in trouble. But fortunately, I'm one of the very rare cases where it just didn't. The majority of the time, however, if you do not teach your child these things, if you do not explain to them what many of these issues are early enough, trust me, years before you think it's going to happen, they're going to be learning about these things somewhere besides you. They're going to be learning about them from people who know serious consequences of drugs and alcohol and, unsafe sex, and who don't care. Or they're going to learn about things from kids their own age whose only source of this education was maybe pornography or their older siblings or what they've seen in movies. Likewise, if you're not telling your children enough about sex, they're going to find out from the internet, and that can have an absolutely horrific effect on kids when the first source they have for information on sex is from porn. That's a horrific way for you to have to learn about how intimacy works, and it sabotages your ability to comprehend how a healthy intimate relationship works from a very young age. You have to be proactive. You need to be telling your children about these things in terms that they understand, and you need to explain to them why certain things are spiritually damaging, if that's your belief, or why they are mentally or physiologically damaging. Treat your children like human beings. Talk to them like equals, or talk to them like you actually respect them and care about their opinions and their thoughts on these matters. Don't just tell your kids you can't do this thing because I said so. Obviously, your children should respect your authority, and at the end of the day, if you say no to something, that's a hard line that they should not cross. But they're going to be far more tempted to defy what you're telling them if you don't treat them with respect and you don't explain to them logically why things are wrong. If somebody had explained to me at a young age, some people have blood diseases and you get them by touching their blood, I wouldn't have thought people are just being nonsensical idiots by saying, if somebody's bleeding, run away, don't touch them, get screaming away into the furthest corner you can from them and make sure not to come in contact with them. If somebody had just explained to me that there are some very strong chemicals that you can sustain serious brain damage from if you inhale them, I wouldn't have sniffed the glue in 5th grade. Did I just make a video about sniffing glue? Yes. Yes, I did. Regardless, the point here is, please, parents, you need to be proactive, and you can't assume that children are going to be as naive and sheltered as you were at their age. The media and the culture, even in schools for young children, is drastically different than it was a generation ago, even 5 to 10 years ago. And you don't have the luxury of being naive and continuing to put it off because something is awkward for you. What's worse, for example, you having to have a really awkward conversation with your son about puberty and sexual urges and pornographic material, or your son being 16 or 17 with his first girlfriend and already having erectile dysfunction from having sexual burnout from being a porn addict because you didn't explain to him logically with the respect that you would have for another human being why that stuff can be bad for you. That's pretty much it for this video. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and a lot of people my age are parents, and it's just one of those things that is crucial for your child's development. And it's crucial if you want your child to be able to have authentic, rewarding experiences that aren't all completely dictated and manipulated by their peers and peer pressure in the media and extremely dangerous, quite frankly, misinformation that they're going to get from those sources. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys dearly, and I will see you again soon. Bye.